We are moving on to what already is our final debate. This is around the theme of employee benefits. We're going to be talking about unlimited paid time off, also known as PTO. As the term suggests, it's a vacation policy that allows employees to take as much free time as they want, as long as it does not interfere with their ability to complete their work. Most companies will still have rules for requesting PTO. The policy simply avoids putting a hard cap on the amount of time the employee can take in a given year. Now, let's look at some stats. According to a MetLife survey, unlimited PTO is the #1 most valued emerging employee benefit. 72% of employees are interested in unlimited PTO as a benefit. As with everything, though, there's another side to the unlimited paid time off story. Offering unlimited PTO won't work in every business. The entire concept is based on autonomy, freedom, and trust, so employees need to be able to perform under these conditions. On top of that, it's important to have a clear and comprehensive policy in place, as well as a defined process for requesting and approving time off. If employees are confused by your policy or feel pressured not to take time off, this can lead to stress, resentment, and burnout. In fact, various articles point out some of the main concerns regarding unlimited PTO. Peer pressure, a never-give-up warrior culture, and an unwillingness to take vacation ultimately leads to employee burnout. And unless managers encourage vacation, employees too often don't take the days they should and eventually burn out. According to a 2020 Forbes article, a growing amount of evidence suggests that unlimited vacation days might in fact prove a fast track to stress and burnout. And this brings me to our third and final statement of the day. Unlimited paid time off policies are a scam and lead to employee burnout. Griet, what do you vote on this statement?
No! The biggest letters I can find.
Nice. Marie, what do you vote on this one?
Same, I also vote no, but there are some exceptions maybe.
All right. Griet, let's hear it.
Well, again, I'm going to talk about my own company, but this is a policy we have next to a policy of we work in a full-time regime for 32 hours a week, maximum. So we get our full salary for working maximum 32 hours in a week. A lot of companies also react, yeah, but that's not possible everywhere. Yes, it is. But there is one big issue, potential issue, and that it's all linked to the maturity of your working force. And what we see here at Triangle, we have engaged, passionate, really amazing people, which is awesome. As an employer, at first you could think that's the best thing what can happen to you. But thanks to all the research on happiness at work and well-being at work, I know that, yes, this is amazing, but at the same time, it's also the biggest challenge that can happen to you as an employer. Because if your people are engaged, they are not going to respect their own boundaries, and they are always going to outperform and going to go beyond the limits, which is cool, which is really, wow, it deserves all my respect. But they need to be able to protect themselves from burning out. And I need to be able and willing to help them to protect themselves from burning out. And where it all comes down to, for me, is again, communication. You have to talk with your people, and people have to talk together, because if somebody is taking a day off, yeah, we need to know, of course. We don't want to phone them during their day off. We don't want to ask them silly questions with deadlines that are not really relevant, because, hey, I'm enjoying some time off and the work has to be done. We are just a small company. If one person is saying, ooh, I'm not going to work this year, we have a big, big problem. So you really have to have the right people in your organization, people who are also able and willing to talk about what they think, what they need, what they want, and then think with you on organizational targets and possibilities. And if that's the case, for me, it's the most amazing thing that can happen. To be honest, as a team lead within Triangle, I have a couple of colleagues who I know very well, because I think that's a very important aspect in this theme. And I often reach out to them asking, hey, when are you going to take a couple of hours or a day off? Because you've been working very hard now, and maybe it's just a moment to breathe, a time to relax. And I often get a little pushback saying, yeah, but I don't want to have your yes, but I want to have the best version of yourself. And you cannot be on the entire time, years and years in a row. So take care of yourself, because that's your first priority.
All right, Griet. Well, actually, very interesting, because I wasn't aware of the fact that you are having this policy in your company. So that is very, very cool to hear. I have a couple of points, but I will first go to Marie, because I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
So I completely agree on everything that you said, because from what I've seen with companies that have actually implemented this policy as well, is similar, right? So it really depends probably also on regional culture. I know the stats we were talking about is the US data, so I'll get into that a little bit in a second. But then also there is, company culture as well as individual culture, maybe as an individual person, how you deal with business, tasks and requirements and responsibilities in general. And then managing that, also understanding the cross-cultural differences that people might bring to the table really is key. So I guess it goes back to, proper people management at the end of the day, being a manager, looking out for people, but also teaching them the skills that they need to be able to manage themselves properly. But for that to be able to happen, you really need an environment that allows for that. Even allows for people to make mistakes, right? Maybe you took too little time off last time, so let's reflect on that. Maybe what could we do differently next time, or you took too much, actually, you went overboard and now the work is actually suffering a little bit. And I've seen the differences play out at companies quite differently, right? So what you've seen with companies in the US is exactly that. So the statement of it being a scam might most likely more apply to these types of cases, even though I'm not an expert on the American work landscape as such. So I don't want to make any blunt statements. However, from what I've seen, it's a little bit of a different work culture from how we handle it in Europe, where here we really value time off. It's also, baked into our local labor laws. That's really where you see it best, right? Also in the benefits landscape, benefits have such a huge importance in the American space, because there isn't as much requirements from a legal minimum point of view as there are in Europe. So then you can advertise with these additional benefits. I would say maybe, in the European space, it's a good benefit to have. It also leaves a lot of freedom, but it might not be as required maybe as some might think, because there are tons of companies that give more than generous PTO offerings. What's maybe interesting as well to what Griet said is I can really relate to that from a freelancer perspective, right? So I work by myself. I'm an individual worker, and I've noticed, also in my consulting work over the past few years, there were times where I was, overexerting myself and not really taking care of myself. And the funny thing is, once you're self-employed, you realize it does come around to bite you in the butt, because you're not getting paid when you're sick and burnt out. You can't cover your work anymore. You're not, acquiring new clients when you have to take time off to recuperate, etc. So there's a very direct relation that my work that I've seen of how looking after yourself can really play out. And it should be similar to employees that are working for you. Of course, the difference is once they're sick, they're still being paid at least for a certain amount of time, which is a great safety net to have. But still, it's not an argument for people to overexert themselves in such a way. And maybe it's also not about time off. Maybe it's about ways of working and taking the time to reflect on that. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. I've also seen, on the other hand, SoundCloud, for example, used to have at least I think not from the time that I was there, unlimited time off. And people there were actually using it quite well, right? Even some former colleagues of mine that were American, they took, 30 days off to see their families back in the US, and the company fully supported them in that. But I guess the tricky point then comes in is, also for a manager, how do you train them on what do you approve, what do you not? Is there an upper limit or is there not? How do you still make sure it's fair? So I guess those are the questions people really have to ask themselves before they implement such a policy, because it can be tempting, as it's such a fun benefit to have and great to advertise. Do you then also want to go through the painful experience of having to roll it back, and which is not always possible, right? So definitely think about it beforehand.
Yes, thank you. Actually, this makes me think of a debate that we had on HR Debatable in one of the previous episodes, and I kind of see some similarities here. And it was around like the 4-day work week. Now, Griet, you said that in your company they work maximum 32 hours a week, so that can be over 4 days, I imagine. And so in that debate, when I was giving the context, I remember that one of the arguments against that was that what would happen, or what tends to happen, is that people who are very, very engaged and also very driven, that even if they have a 4-day work week, they tend to still work more than that because they are kind of overachieving. And what happens on the other end of the spectrum is that people who are not necessarily engaged and not motivated, they are actually going to underperform in that kind of setup. And I can imagine the same happening here, because what I was kind of distilling from what you said earlier, Griet, is that, the people in your company are very, very engaged. So I'm then deducting, okay, is that like one kind of condition? Obviously, engagement is a condition for many things, but is having, a very engaged workforce, is that one condition for this to work, this unlimited PTO? Because if you have somebody that is not engaged at all, will they not maybe just try to benefit as much as possible of the fact that they can take unlimited days off? Honestly, so I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, we've been there. We've been working together with several people, and having the right people on board, that's like your first and only starting point. But how do you know if you have the right people on board? Yeah, when you start working together, then you get to discover a lot. And we've discovered with our present workforce that they are the people for us. We need them because they are our right people. But we also had some adventures in which we discovered, oh my God, my co-founder once reached out to me. So this new colleague, relatively new, maybe you should have a talk with her, because every time we have a team meeting, she's always late. If we have to have this kind of talk, then we are not dealing with the right people. And of course, we did talk, but the conversation really quickly oriented in the direction of an exit conversation, to be honest, because being in such a situation, the word maturity that I already mentioned, that's what we really need to get out of everybody. And I need to lead by example, which is, Marie, I totally can understand what you mentioned. I've been working as a freelancer for quite some time in my career. So I'm used to working hard, not counting hours, stuff like that. And I'm still, of course, as a co-founder in my mind, I'm still a freelancer. But I have this example to set out. And if I don't count hours, and if I say 9 p.m. during the weekends, I'm just going to send out emails and I'll be working. Yeah, then I'm putting out an example that I don't want to have within my own company. So it's finding the right people, discovering, yes, they are the right people. We can make it work together. And we really have to lead by example. And if we see things that happen that don't help us in the most healthy direction, then we really have to take a moment to talk things through, because we know what can happen if people, don't take enough care of themselves, which is a possible risk with engaged people. Absolutely.
Yeah, Marie, anything you would like to add?
Sure, totally. And yeah, totally empathize with what you're saying, like, especially when you're self-employed, but also if you're just really motivated and love your work, right? So it's a dopamine hit as well. One more email sent, boom. And sometimes you kind of start to lose oversight of, is this really what I'm enjoying right now? Is this an easy fix for me to actually feel good about myself because I'm getting work done? I think also in society, with starting with school, higher education or whatever you're doing, apprenticeships and then work, you're very much geared towards, results make you feel good because, there's maybe a grade at the end of it. At least that's how I felt for a long time. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing. But yes, there's definitely that risk. But I think also from my learnings, it's as simple as, having conversations maybe at the beginning of the year or once a quarter with the people you're working with or just yourself on what is it actually that I need in terms of time off, and starting to plan a little bit for that, right? So it shouldn't get to the point where, okay, so now I actually am completely exhausted. What do I do? So for myself personally, I figured out that I kind of need a little bit of a break from my clients and people I work with, like every month and a half, even if it's just for a day or two, just so I can have a little bit of a break from all the responsibility, all the accountability, all the time planning, work output, etc., so that then I can feel refreshed and actually continue. I've noticed in the past when I try to stretch it to maybe longer than that, there is a downside, and everyone's different, right? Some people would prefer to be in Bali for 2 months at a time and work from there. Not exactly my idea of a paradise. I do love my, a proper desk setup, so I would prefer to be off and be completely off. But that's just important questions to ask yourself. What type of vacation, PTO type person am I actually? And then, discussing that with your managers, discussing it with your team, and making sure everyone is accommodated for, because also not everyone is the same. I guess that's what this policy is also trying to accomplish, right? Giving people enough freedom and autonomy and the space to really make it their own. But then not everyone has the, I guess, luxury of being self-employed at some point. So they're forced to figure that out, right? So it also helps working with people who've experienced in that and maybe know you well and take on a little bit of a mentorship role. And definitely HR, I think, is there to provide some of these resources, because I think even managers often, see it with execs, CEOs, founders, not that they're the worst at it, but they're definitely, not necessarily the ones to take all the vacation that they have. They're the ones working overtime, which, might also be a job requirement, but having some support on that end can definitely make a difference.
Yes. I think something that I picked up from what both of you are saying, and it's something that I'm a big advocate of in general, is I think here for this unlimited PTO to work, it requires from each and every one of us to take responsibility. And that's what you were saying, Marie, and what you were saying as well, Griet. It requires us to take responsibility for our own, I don't really like that word, but I think it is the right word here. It's well-being, It requires us to ask ourselves the question, like what you are doing, Marie, every month and a half. That you need 1 or 2 days off in order to, let's say, stay well. I'm gonna say it like that.
Stay sane.
Yeah, exactly. Stay sane. But this is something. We can have the best managers in the world, and we can have great support from HR within the company when it comes to all of this. But HR or my manager cannot decide for me what works best. Because for Marie, it might be, 1 or 2 days every month and a half, more or less. For me, it might actually be a month in Bali. I'm just using a bit of an example here. But this is something, and I think that comes back to what you call maturity, Griet. This comes back to a certain maturity. Yes, the maturity in terms of taking responsibility for, taking my job seriously and doing the best job that I can, but also taking responsibility for my own health, both physical and mental health, and taking days off just to indeed be able to continue to perform well. So that's what I'm picking up I think when it comes to this, because once again, as a company and as a manager, we can set the example, we can have all these fantastic things in place, but at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. What do we think on that before? Yes, Griet, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, we also do a lot of coaching and support for managers who want to prevent stress and burnout issues in their team. And they always feel guilty when somebody drops out because of burnout. Yeah, what have I done wrong? Well, if you have done everything you should be doing and could do, which is not always the case, but very often it is, yeah, you have for each person the final responsibility for their own health. Because if you say as a manager, as HR, as an organization, we create this context in which everybody can thrive, feel happy and healthy. Yeah, if your working force or somebody within your team is going to say, whatever, I'm just going to go. Yeah, it's not going to work. And the final responsibility for our own health, it's up to us. Absolutely.
Marie, anything you would like to say?
Nothing to add, really. I love your last point. I think it really is about, ownership and self-management. And again, that's something that people might still need to learn. And also maybe that's something where we can look to Gen Z. They seem to be really good at that. So maybe they've got a few lessons for us on that point.
Definitely.
Yeah, I like that. And I think perhaps not just on that point, but on some other points as well. But yeah, that's a nice thing. Beautiful way to end this third debate as well. I want to say a huge thank you to both of you for joining. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks everybody for tuning in to today's episode of HR Debatable. Don't hesitate to share this episode with your colleagues, with your friends, perhaps even with your family if you enjoyed it. And I see you very soon again for another episode. Bye.